What's up, guys? Back at you with another episode of our Cosmic I Ching series. The actual book is called I Ching Oracle, the Cosmic Way. I call it the Cosmic I Ching because that's a bit shorter and easier to say. And it is where the cosmic and cosmic human design comes from this book. And we're looking at all 64 of the hexagrams in the I Ching. And this new version of the I Ching, it was written around the year 2002, I believe. It's just fantastic, the cosmic meanings that of all the hexagrams that it gives to us. And if you've read the I Ching, you're familiar with the I Ching, you might be surprised at some of the differences you find in this text. But I do believe it is correct, and it is the true meaning of, and what a revolutionary meaning it presents to us if we really understand what it's saying here. Well, without further ado, we'll get into today's episode, Hexagram 56, The Wanderer. Just fire over a mountain, fire on the mountain. The Judgment, the Wanderer, success through the small. Being firmly correct brings good fortune to the wanderer. The sage uses the image of the wanderer to describe the person who is on the path of freeing and bringing to maturity his true self. And remember, the sage is the cosmic teacher, this invisible consciousness that we can interact with and who we actually communicate with when we consult the I Ching. And this applies to all versions of the I Ching. It's not like, you're just using this version of the I Ching and that's the only I Ching that this applies to. No, this I Ching is by its own definition the definitive version of the I Ching, makes clear a lot of things from all previous translations and versions of the I Ching. Now, it does mention, it's in the text, the authors do mention that, you do need to consult the sage on what version of the I Ching you're using, because it turns out some versions of the I Ching simply don't possess the metaphorical complexity of the language in order to allow the sage to communicate through the text. And that's what we're really aiming for when picking out a version of the I Ching to use, is a version that possesses the kind of threshold complexity and metaphorical density, I suppose, to enable the sage to speak through it to you and interface with your own consciousness. Anyways, he is a wanderer because he must make this journey alone, with no one between him and the sage as his teacher. He no longer looks to his family as the authority, but makes his own decisions based on his common sense, even at times when he is totally misunderstood by those around him. Following the I Ching has often been experienced as a lonely path. This is true only when the I Ching is viewed as something lifeless, and only as a book of ancient wisdom. When the student develops his personal relationship with the sage, the alive consciousness that speaks through the book, he finds himself in the company of a wonderful and trustworthy friend, thus no longer feels lonely. The difficulties he experiences thereafter occur only when he doubts the good intentions of the sage or misunderstands why the sage must retreat in the face of the ego. His journey has the purpose to bring to expression his uniqueness and thereby fulfill his destiny. This occurs through his experience of the cosmic truths. This hexagram states the prerequisite for the wanderer's fulfilling his destiny, that he develop an understanding of his true place in the cosmic whole as an equal to all its other aspects. It is from this understanding that modesty, which keeps him in harmony with the cosmic way, springs. Success through the small refers to the success that comes when a person includes the sage and the helpers in his daily life. The small are the transformations that take place in the atomic realm due to the activity of the invisible helpers when a person takes them into account in all that he does. Among these cosmic gifts and the help he receives are a true relationship with the person who suits him, good health, a place to live, the job that fulfills him, and material wealth. He is meant to enjoy them. They are given to nourish him, teach him, and help him express his uniqueness. He realizes that if he allows the ego to appropriate these gifts through attachment, he decreases the cosmic whole and creates what the I Ching calls blame. Then he loses them as gifts of the cosmos, and they cease coming. His losing them is expressed in line 3 in the words, "The wanderer's inn burns down." The inn is a metaphor for these gifts of home and sustenance that he receives while in a bodily form. The image of an inn is a reference to the temporary function of these gifts to fulfill his needs of the moment. The inn, as the temporary abode of the wanderer, is the complement to his property, which is defined in line 2 as his dignity and self-respect. By complement is meant, the two are drawn together through attraction. The wanderer describes the person who has undertaken the liberation of his true self while in the middle of the world created by the collective ego. He may be estranged from those around him because they do not understand his process. He differs from them in that he is not inwardly attached to his possessions because he knows where they come from and knows that his needs will be answered. Thus, he is secure and centered within himself. What guides the wanderer on his path is his inner truth. He is free to experience his cosmic possessions as part of his learning process. This freedom includes making mistakes that come from not understanding and therefore not respecting the cosmic principles that rule the cosmos as a whole. The cosmos gives him all the help he needs to return to his path before the deviations become too great. A deviation or dissonance from the greater harmony is felt as a tension that tells him he needs to look for its cause and to correct himself. All dissonances are caused by mistaken ideas put forth by the collective ego. Their purpose is to lure him back into its way of life. In order to return to the cosmic way, the person needs to seek out the seed phrases and images that underlie the mistaken ideas in question and delete them from his inner program. They may exist in the form of projections or spells. When dissonances come from the egos and other people, he needs to say the inner no to them. Correcting dissonances as they occur is the meaning of being firmly correct brings good fortune to the wanderer. The cosmic wanderer differs from the person who has adopted an image of himself as being on a spiritual journey. A person may receive this hexagram to inform him of the difference between following the path of his inner truth, which has never been trod by anyone before him, and following a path which has been laid out for him by another, and which the many are treading. While the cosmic wanderer seeks to fulfill his uniqueness, the spiritual wanderer is seeking to fulfill a self-image of goodness or perfection. A person may also receive this hexagram when he has forgotten his true place in the cosmos, through having adopted the human-centered view of the universe and other mistaken ideas and beliefs that stem from that view. Adopting the human-centered view of the universe leads to an attachment to the apparent world as the only reality and the only thing that gives meaning to his life. Or it means looking at life on the earth as something that needs to be transcended in exchange for a better life in the hereafter. The human-centered view of the universe also distorts a person's relationship with the sage. It either makes him think that he can command the sage as a sort of genie whose purpose is to supply his wishes, or it makes him see the sage as a higher power that has authority over him. Among the mistaken ideas addressed by this hexagram are those that express the human-centered view of the universe, but specifically those that exclude the helpers in the invisible world and a person's relationship with them. Examples of such ideas are, our bodily existence is all there is. This leads to attachment to the material world. Or human beings are divided into body, mind, and soul, leading to a person's developing his higher/spiritual nature at the expense of the rest of his being. Or heaven and earth are separate spheres, with heaven and earth being conceived as separate places, and heaven being superior to earth. This idea divides the cosmic whole, demonizes the earth, and makes a person long to leave his body and the earth behind. Ideas that define the purpose of life as being to perfect the moral standards created by the collective ego. These ideas are coupled with the threat of death and damnation if the individual should follow his inner truth instead. When the wanderer, as one who is following the sage's teachings, gives way to the collective ego's threats and follows its standards, he loses his inner home. This is described in line 6 in the words, "The wanderer's nest burns down." A person may also lose his inner home when he sacrifices his true self to fame, glory, material considerations, or spiritual perfection. Wilhelm informs us that strange lands and separation are the wanderer's lot. This is a bleak view of human life in a body. It suggests that humans have been cast out of Eden by an unfriendly cosmos, whereas in fact, all separation and estrangement from the cosmos are created by the individuals adopting the collective ego's false values and following them. In doing so, he creates one fate after another for himself. Wilhelm's statement is an example of how the collective ego reverses cause and effect. This hexagram makes it clear that help is available from the cosmos at any given time to end a person's fate and separation from the whole. No one is meant to carry on possible burdens, nor is a person's progress meant to be stopped by insurmountable obstructions due to spells, projections, or poison arrows put on him either by himself or by others. If a person is hindered by these problems, he can identify the mistaken ideas that have caused him with the help of the RTCM and ask for help to free himself of them in the here and now, according to the instructions given in Appendix 1. The traditional commentaries to this hexagram mention lawsuits that must not be dragged out indefinitely. These lawsuits, which can be outer conflicts, begin as inner wars and conflicts that are accompanied by spells, projections, and poison arrows. Participating in them creates a fate, whereas saying inner no to them and turning them over to the helpers leads to transformation and the end of the fate. The wanderer can also be a metaphor for a person who, having become estranged from his true self, wants to learn from the sage. Such a person's true self is that the stage of development it had attained when it was abandoned and imprisoned in childhood. Due to this estrangement, the person is like a child learning about the world. If he will put aside his distrust in the benevolent nature of the invisible world, he will be shown everything he needs to know to make progress on his path in the inner and the outer world. Wow. Line 1. If the wanderer busies himself with trivial things, he draws down misfortune upon himself. This line can call attention to a fate a person has created by busying himself with concerns of the collective ego. Amongst such trivial concerns are judgments based on the human-centered view of the universe, about justice, crime, and the supposed guilt of others, about supposed rights and privileges, attributing catastrophes to weather or nature when they have been the result of expectations projected onto nature, gossip and idle curiosity about others' relationships, including the intimate affairs of animals, blaming one's fate on an outside cause rather than seeing its cause in oneself, watching whether others are conforming properly to the moral and behavioral standards, the oughts and musts of the collective ego, preoccupying oneself with things afar rather than what lies directly in front of one, dismissing things of real significance, such as money, as mundane, in favor of working on a spiritual self-image. When a person does not understand the cosmic way and has created a fate due to his incorrect views, the ego in him will seek to put the blame on something or someone else, the cosmos, life, nature, or even his true self, rather than having the ego itself recognized as the cause. In addition, it may put a heavy burden of guilt upon the person. He needs to catch on to this tactic of the ego before it plunges him into yet another fate. The line can also refer to a person who feels guilty for possessing something while others have nothing. Possibly he has been taught as a child to take on guilt for the starving children in the world, human maltreatment of animals, trees, the earth, etc. It is one thing to care about all these things and act responsibly in regard to them, but it is another to allow guilt to drive one to fulfill the image of the compassionate person. Striving to fulfill this self-image keeps the person from saying the inner no to wrong conditions and their causes, and from asking for help from the helpers, which are truly able to correct these conditions through transformation. Line 2, the wanderer comes to an end. He has his property with him. He wins the steadfastness of the cosmic helpers. Here, the wanderer, the person who is on the path of his inner truth, is in the midst of others. The property he has with him consists of his dignity and self-respect. In keeping with his self-respect, he holds to the others only as long as they hold to their own dignity and self-respect. So long as he maintains this guideline, he draws the cosmic helpers of the invisible world to help him in all that he does. This line states the principle that it is modesty and sincerity, when combined with dignity and self-respect, that draw the helpers into one's life. This line can also point to seed phrases that lead a person to throw away his dignity and self-respect to get something, such as, there is no help coming from outside, therefore one has to make compromises. There is no such thing as helpers. You can't wait around for something you can't see, or how do I know they will come? Line 3, the wanderer's inn burns down. He loses the steadfastness of the cosmic helpers. Danger. The inn, or gift of sustenance to the wanderer, has burned down because the person has betrayed his self-respect and dignity by tolerating the arrogance and indifference of others around him. He has done this in order to get along with them instead of saying the inner no and retreating inwardly. His lax attitude has caused the cosmic helpers mentioned in line 2 to retreat, and if persisted in, will create a fate, which is the danger mentioned. This line describes the principle that the wanderer cannot take for granted that he will be protected and furthered by the helpers when he carelessly betrays his inner truth. He can correct himself if he retreats in time from his overconfidence. Line 4, the wanderer rests in a shelter. He obtains his property and an axe. My heart is not glad. Here, the wanderer whose inn has burned down in the previous line has had the benefit of a cosmic intervention, the shelter mentioned. In comparison to what he has lost, the shelter is minimal. His heart is not glad because the ego has been trying to blame his loss on the sage and to discount everything he has learned through following his inner truth as invalid or worthless. The property and axe remind him that this knowledge has not been lost, is still valid, and if he will put aside his pride and regret his mistake, he will be restored to the cosmic harmony. This line notes that once a person has begun to learn from the sage and to follow the path of his inner truth, abandoning that path to return to the world of the collective ego makes him feel miserable. Another meaning of my heart is not glad. The ego tries at this point to prevent his return to his inner path by interjecting some form of self-doubt, blame, or shame. He needs to free himself of these elements by saying the inner no to them. That is all he needs to do to regain his in. This line can also point to someone who believes that he will be sheltered if he follows the rules of the collective ego. The axe in this case refers to the fact that the property he attains through playing the ego's games must always be defended from thieves and intruders who would take it away. Because he has turned away from cosmic protection, his heart is never at peace. This line can also apply to a person who takes shelter in incorrect ideas, which, like a faulty roof or floor, fall through when he begins to rely on them. Such ideas include a mechanistic view of the world. An example is the use of medications that seek to cure solely through chemical means, rather than by addressing the fundamental issues of consciousness, which create susceptibility to illnesses. Spells, projections, or poison arrows may be at the root of the problem. Line 5, he shoots a pheasant. It drops with the first arrow. In the end, this brings an office. Here, the pheasant refers to the self-image of one who has fully adopted the human-centered view of the universe. He thus views himself in the image of God or of the superior man. He has played God through judging others as evil, assuming that he has the power to forgive, encroaching into others' spaces, indulging in the use of power, acting as if he possesses rights over other people and things, believing he has been given the power to authorize others. In allowing this self-image of superiority, the person has separated from the cosmic whole and engaged the cosmic warrior, whose business it is to shoot down all arrogance. Whoa. The mention of an office is informing the person that it is not too late to retreat from his arrogant self-image. If he does so, he can enter the service of the sage. Other versions of playing God occur when a person places all his identity in the achievement of knowledge, Such a person believes that attaining mastery gives him power, and thus he invests all his energy in developing the self-image of the master. A phrase connected with this self-image is, there are no limits to what you can do with your mind. This self-image also gives rise to the mistaken idea that the person is morally free to do any experiment on anything. The office given a person by the sage is the task which enables him to fulfill his destiny. This does not necessarily mean that he has to change the outer circumstances of his job. He can serve the sage in whatever position he is in. He is counseled by this line to free himself from the fear of having to change. Line 6, the bird's nest burns up. The wanderer laughs at first, then must lament and weep. In this line, the bird refers to the wanderer, and the nest to the place within himself where he feels at home. When, through sacrificing his true nature, he obtains a more prestigious home, fame, possessions, or the hope of glory in the afterlife, the wanderer first laughs. Receiving this line is to make him aware that he will soon come to recognize that in abandoning his modesty and simplicity, he has lost everything of real value, causing him to lament the loss of his true home. This line can also refer to a person who has been experiencing a fate, but because he is truly sorry for the effects of his arrogance on others, his fate has been brought to an end. Thus, he is once more reunited with the cosmic whole. The bird's nest burning up can also point to the mistaken idea of the phoenix rising from the ashes, which implies that one has to lose everything in order to be cleansed of the mistakes one has made. That's very interesting, as I'm sure some of you know, in human design, 2027 is supposed to initiate the cross of the sleeping phoenix, where, apparently all of this crazy stuff's going to happen. That's very interesting, and yeah. A similar idea is that a person's body must die in order for the person to enjoy eternal life or union with God. This idea creates a fate because it violates the cosmic principle that every mistake can be corrected simply by identifying and rooting out the mistaken idea or belief that has caused it. Wow, 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 wow. Let's read that again. The cosmic principle that every mistake can be corrected simply by identifying and rooting out the mistaken idea or belief that has caused it. It also denies the fact that life in a body, while being subject to time and space, is nourished, protected, and held by the cosmic consciousness at all times when the person brings himself into harmony with it. All right, guys, that's it for episode 56 here on Cosmic Human Design. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Don't forget to like and subscribe right there, please. And I'll see you guys in the next one.